Studio, and what a time to have him, because just yesterday, as we mentioned, and you've been hearing in the news and been reading, I'm sure, the consent decree from the federal government approved by the city council, now just awaiting.
You're just like diving into the serious stuff.
Judges order.
Can we at least ask him what he's so excited about when we become part of Canada?
Oh, sure.
I mean, when Canada absorbs us, what are you most looking forward to? Is it the maple cookies? That's mine.
I don't know anything about that.
Good answer.
Good job starting off the year.
Sorry, Adam.
Let's get to the serious stuff.
You can restart. I just wanted to talk about Canada more.
For people hearing this and saying, okay, we've had a consent decree with the state, okay, now one's been approved federally, how's that gonna look differently for the police department of Minneapolis?
Well, to be honest, I got the consent decree for the first time over the weekend. I looked through it. I sat in a meeting yesterday all day with the city council, and then obviously over at the U.S. Attorney's Office with the Assistant Attorney General. I gotta tell you, to be honest, I think things have gone as good as anyone could expect them to be. You know, there's no question that Minneapolis is the most scrutinized police department in America. This is a department that typically had about 900 officers. We've lost more than 500 since 2020. And so, you know, the cops who have stayed here, all of the dozens of new people that are coming on board, we're going to be welcoming 33 new cadets and community service officers tonight. I mean, I think the people that we have today, honestly, are heroes for how incredibly resilient that they have been. And so while, you know, if this consent decree now filed in court, once it becomes a court order, will wind up being the only police department in America to have consent decrees over a police department in both state and federal court. That has not happened before. So at the same time, while we have that distinction, we're also the first police department that's getting into this. You know, it's not a fresh start getting into this. We've had a head start. We've had this state agreement. And a lot of what is in this federal consent decree mirrors almost exactly things that are in the state agreement as well. So we've had an implementation unit that was started already, that's up and running. We've had dozens of community meetings around policies that have to be changed. We've you know, gone through creating a force investigations team already, which is also have a head start creating it, which is also listed in the consent decree. So I mean, I think there's a whole lot of work that's been done, and people are going to see more and more of the results of it coming up in March once we hit the 1-year anniversary of us being monitored. The other thing I'd say, which is important, is I think we've really been blessed with how things have played out here in terms of both community support for the department as we go through this, as well as you know, the monitoring team that we do have. I think a lot of the criticism around the country with police consent decrees have been, you know, that they tend to be kind of like what they call like a cottage industry for monitors, that monitors get to basically sit back and call balls and strikes. They don't necessarily have to help implement things and help make change real. I tell you honestly, I have seen a significant difference with the monitoring team that we have here. They have been very engaged with us, trying to help us, you know, think through how do we implement these things in ways that make sense, both for the community and for our police officers. And I think that's been a significant change than what a lot of other cities have experienced in the past.
What specifically is going to change for the people of Minneapolis and for your officers?
Well, I think, you know, I've said before that any of these consent decrees, you know, are more than just kind of a checklist of things to do and prove that you did it, more than just projects to accomplish. I think the reality is, you know, the men and women of this police department here, and in particular the leadership that we have here today, our command staff, our supervisors, I think are deeply committed to getting things right. They want to be the good police that everyone in the community deserves, and I think we're seeing the results of that more and more every day with the support of our residents. And we also need to, you know, be the police department that supports our employees. modern policing is a very difficult and traumatizing job over the course of a normal career in a city. It's been that much more so for the officers that have been working here over the last 5 years. And so I think, a lot of times where in cities that consent decrees happen or they have these investigations, in my opinion, systems have failed good men and women of the police department. I think if we correct, these consent decrees are about correcting systemic problems in the department. And part of that is working to ensure that we're doing the right things for the health and wellness of our officers so that they have the support that they need to do this incredibly challenging job.
You mentioned that your department is the most scrutinized in the country and one that has battled for funding, battled for staffing. Do you have the ability to implement all the changes that the federal government wants? Can you do that with what you have right now?
Well, I mean, no, straight up, no, that's the answer. People at times, for whatever reason, complain that the police department costs more today than it did in the past. That is a reality. If people want good policing, if people want public safety, we're gonna have to pay for it. Yes, the cost of the police department has increased over the last few years, just like everything else in life has increased, but at the same time, we've gotten way too small. This past year, we hit the lowest staffing level in this city in at least 4 decades. And so it is an incredible challenge to try and, beat back this, ridiculous uptick that people have been suffering through with crime over the last few years when you're dealing with staffing the way it is. At the same time, these consent decrees add a whole lot more new work that did not exist in this organization before. And so that is an added dimension. And the reality is, in the past here, maybe a little more than 3% of the time, we were providing training for our police officers and deploying them the rest of the other 97% of the time. So these agreements require additional and new training. And I think that's an opportunity for us to provide realistic, scenario-based adult learning that is appropriate so that our officers have the skills that they need. At the same time, there's other things that we need to do to support our cops, other trainings that our officers need that are not in these agreements that ensure that they are prepared to be the police officers that our community deserves. And so I think it is a whole lot of work, but it is far from a panacea or the end-all be-all of what we need to get the job done.
You said consent decrees cost money, so does training. Is the city council going to approve money and training for the officers?
The city council voted unanimously yesterday to approve the agreement.
Yeah, the agreement, but then the money that it costs to implement the agreement is something different.
Yeah, this is gonna cost millions. Millions. I mean, it's millions of dollars just to the monitor alone. And understand a lot of this involves a commitment to update facilities, update equipment, provide additional training. Look, with staffing the way it is today, for every minute, for every hour, every day that we have additional training, that provides an expense somewhere else. That's additional overtime that we need in patrol or investigations to keep up with the work demand. So I mean, the bottom line for any city that's in these agreements is you have to prove that you are implementing the requirements of the agreement. So if things that are required that are not funded, the city will not be able to prove compliance and we will not be able to get out of it. And the whole time we'll be paying to continue to be monitored while we're not able to comply.
You're talking about, the training and things that have to change, but like specifically, is there things that officers do now that they'll no longer be able to do?
Like, for example, remember that video of the chief running somebody down? You were right, a perp was fleeing, right? That went viral. Are you gonna be allowed to do that? Are you gonna be allowed to chase people down?
Of course. There's nothing in here that precludes us from, addressing serious street crime. That we have a sworn oath and obligation. We're in the business of trying to save people's lives here and trying to do something about the unacceptable levels of serious crime and violence that are affecting our community. So I mean, there's nothing in here that stops us from doing our job.
I did see a report though that like if somebody runs from an officer, that officer would not be able to chase them on foot. Is that true? And does that lead people to, there's a overwhelming sentiment out there that this, the police reform has caused a lawless culture where people feel like, criminals feel like they're emboldened because police, pardon the pun, are handcuffed in some certain circumstances.
Well, this is a 170-page legal document. So there's plenty of stuff for people to cherry pick out of there and then go off on whatever tangent that they want. There is nothing in this document that is implemented instantaneously. Everything that's in there, we gotta come up with policy, both in consultation with the community, as well as with the DOJ and with the independent monitor, and ultimately before a federal judge. Before we implement that policy, then we have to have training for our officers, in order to hold them accountable. So nothing here gets implemented overnight. It's a very thoughtful process that involves, input from all the stakeholders I mentioned. And the other thing too, like the example that you just gave about foot chases, what it requires, like the example you just gave, that's already the law in the United States.
Okay.
If the cops pull up and a random person just starts running, that is not enough to seize the person. And by engaging in a foot chase and yelling, "Police, stop," that is legally a seizure under the United States Constitution, and police can't do it. So that is not a big deal.
President Trump, President-elect Trump, is going to be in office in a matter of weeks, and he's not been a fan of consent decrees. Has this been an exercise in futility? Can he say, we're not going to have these anymore?
Well, I believe the most accurate answer is that the city has entered into this agreement with the Department of Justice. It's a lawsuit between the DOJ and the city of Minneapolis. It has been assigned now to a federal judge. It does not become court enforceable until the judge enters it in as a court order. So let's say, fast forward a couple of weeks, there's a new president, a new attorney general, a new leadership at the Department of Justice. They decide they're not interested in this anymore. If it is not yet a court order, it is possible that they can come to the federal judge here in Minnesota and try and withdraw from that. But ultimately, it is up to the federal judge. And just quite frankly, I don't think that is likely in this situation. I think it is far more likely than not that this will be finalized, even if that happens. And a similar situation did happen 4 years ago in Baltimore, where the timing was similar to the way it is in Minneapolis, and DOJ did try to withdraw from Baltimore's agreement, and ultimately the federal judge, entered into the court order.
Obviously, it's the biggest news that we have with the chief right now. A couple more questions on that. We'll try to get some other topics, but Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara in studio with us live. It's 9:46. More after this on WCCO. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara, 9:49. That's your Linda's Construction time check. A couple more questions on the consent decree. Is there anything in there, and I know it's a big document, 170 pages, but is there anything in there that you feel that you're objecting to, or you feel like we're already doing this, or this is unnecessary, or this is unfair, or we don't have the ability to do this?
Well, I think, again, I think for the most part, the vast majority of it mirrors what is already in the agreement that we have in state court. There's a couple of things that are different because obviously they address, federal concerns. There's stuff in there. So, for example, there's stuff in there about First Amendment activity and interacting with journalists during protest First Amendment activities. Nothing in there that I've seen that has not already been implemented by the MPD. Additionally, there's stuff in there about behavioral health response, which is something that is not covered under the state agreement, because that's they found an ADA violation from the city in doing that. That essentially just encourages the city to expand what has already been a widely successful BCR, behavioral care response program, that we already have, and it requires additional training, some enhanced training for some of our patrol officers when dealing with response to persons in crisis, which I think is something that is very much needed here, because that is a very significant volumes of the calls for service that our officers still wind up getting placed in. People have thought that they could, kind of get rid of cops responding to persons in mental health. You're never going to get rid of that completely. these mental health professionals are not going to go into a situation that is unsafe. And we've had times where they have been gone to calls where initially, by the way the call was screened, they thought it was safe, and they have gotten into situations where they need to call for help for the police, and it becomes an emergency. And so I think this will help. This also provides a requirement for the city to have better trained mental health persons available at 911 when people initially get the call, to try and help them more directly over the phone. So I think all of those things are good. But again, I want to highlight that this is the opposite of defund the police. This requires the city to make a whole lot of investments into the police department and into public safety around these issues in general. And there is no way we're going to accomplish any of that without additional staff and ensuring that we have the funding that's necessary to meet these goals.
So even if the city council would say, well, we don't want to fund this, or we don't want to put more money towards this, this decree would force their hand?
Yes, if the city did not provide the funds to implement the terms of this agreement, the city would continue to not be in compliance with it. And at the same time, we would continue to wind up paying millions of dollars to a monitor to tell the court that we're not in compliance because we haven't implemented everything.
Switching gears for a minute, does the city need mounted police? Should we keep them?
Yes, I think unquestionably they are a great value. You know, I come from a department that, you know, had mounted police for well over a century. And I have seen throughout my career, both there and here, the value that officers that are mounted provide.
I've never seen them chasing somebody down, like galloping through the streets.
Oh, I have seen that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have.
Do they have like a lasso?
No.
You haven't been to the places I've been to.
No, I even saw an officer on horseback in Newark arrest someone at a shooting.
Oh, wow.
By himself on horseback. So they're the real police.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing I would say why it's particularly needed in Minneapolis, and you know, critics have said, well, it's the last unit in the state to have one, last department in the state to have one. Well, guess what? Minneapolis is different from every other municipality in Minnesota. I don't know what to tell you. The needs that we have here are significant. And so, you know, the ability to have police officers on horseback, particularly at events where there's large crowds, cops are able to, on horseback, see over the crowds, is one value in and of itself. The other thing I would say that is remarkable and incredibly important to the people in our community at this particular time is the ability to engage community. You know, cops on horseback, when they come down the street, you know, you see it over and over again. You know, people want to go up to them, they want to talk to the officers in ways that just do not happen if the cop is coming by in any other means. And you know, I've seen it personally over and over again. Even people, you know, people who may have been on the other side of the law, they're walking down the street, they got their kids with them, their kids want to stop, they wind up engaging the officer, and it's a positive interaction. And with everything that everyone here has been through, we need to be doing everything that we possibly can to have those positive interactions that are outside of, you know, typically what happens when cops show up.
Andy Luger, as often is the case, U.S. attorneys with new administrations leave the job and new ones are appointed. Can you just comment on what kind of partner he's been?
I mean, the U.S. attorney has been absolutely amazing. I'm incredibly thankful for him. You know, his leadership has been second to none, particularly, you know, considering everything that Minneapolis has been through. Because of him, I've been able to embed Minneapolis police investigators in his office. We have, you know, done incredible work that's produced results for the community, getting carjacking under control, addressing, you know, trigger pullers in some of these criminal street gangs out in the city, and providing real consequences for people that are causing real harm in our community. I think a direct result both of a lot of the work that community organizations have been doing this in the city, as well as the work, you know, with U.S. Attorney Luger and all of our law enforcement partners, has resulted in what we saw last year in North Minneapolis. North Minneapolis had the fewest number of shooting victims in a decade. You'd have to go back to 2013 to have that few. So I think that's very significant, and I think it's a direct result of the work that he has led, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. Where I come from, we've been talking about this consent decree. Where I come from, the feds did not want to work with the Newark Police Department at that time while we were under investigation. Because obviously the U.S. Attorney's Office is a part of the Department of Justice. That made no difference under U.S. Attorney Lugar's leadership here, because obviously we have really, really pressing issues that are a matter of life and death for our community. So I'm thankful for him for standing up for us and for working with us and all of our law enforcement partners to get the results that we've had with him.
I want to leave us on a positive note. You just had the National Public Safety Summit here in Minneapolis. You said maybe a few years ago, all of the chiefs wouldn't have come to Minneapolis.
For sure.
Share with us something positive about Minneapolis Police Department or the summit to leave us on a good note.
Yeah, the Public Safety Partnership was run by the Department of Justice last month, and it brought over 600 law enforcement executives from around the country, chiefs from major cities, U.S. attorneys, federal law enforcement, even community leaders. And quite frankly, I mean, they said it themselves. A couple of years ago, Minneapolis would not even be considered to be the place to come to and have this type of conference to talk about policing and what's going right. So it was an incredibly important moment for me, and I wanted as many of our officers as possible to be there to experience that, because it provided us an opportunity to tell our story, and that's what I tried to do. I tried to tell and let people see the humanity and the resilience of the men and women of this police department and everything everybody in this city has been through over the last few years. And I think it was very powerful to see the director, Carlton Moore from DOJ, up there before all of our officers and all the other law enforcement officials that were there, talking about the baby blue uniforms that he saw in the crowd, and how much it meant to him as he thought, how much that they have all been through and how resilient and dedicated they are to trying to keep people safe in our community. I think it was very positive. It was very powerful.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for the time as always. We look forward to our next conversation. It's 9:58. News coming up next.